My name is Luke. I was 38 years old when I watched my wife lean into another man's ear at the birthday party she said she planned for me. And something inside me went very, very still. Not loud, not angry. Still. That kind of still that happens when your body understands something before your mind will let you say it out loud. Let me tell you about that night. Because the night matters. Every single detail of it. The house was full. 70 people. My cousins from Atlanta. My college roommate Dre, who had driven 6 hours without telling me he was coming, just showed up at my front door, holding a bottle of bourbon and grinning like a man who knew he was about to make somebody's night. My mother was in the back corner near the food table with a plate she had fixed for herself, because my mother does not trust catering. She has never trusted catering. She has brought her own plate to every event I have hosted for the last 12 years, and I have never once asked her to stop. Edison lights were strung across the back porch. A real DJ, not a playlist. Deep wine-colored flowers on every table. The kind of birthday party that a man spends 12 years working toward and then stands inside and thinks, is this actually mine? It was mine. Every part of it. I came from a 2-bedroom apartment in Southeast with my mother and my grandmother and a library card I treated like a second income. I built the architecture career from nothing. 6 a.m. alarms, double shifts before I made partner, Saturdays bent over blueprints while other men my age were on golf courses. The house, the firm, the life, all of it drawn up from scratch. Line by line, room by room, with my own hands. And 4 years ago, I had added one more thing to what I'd built. Nicole. She had walked into a mutual friend's dinner party in a burnt orange dress that was doing every single thing it was supposed to do. And she laughed at something I said before I'd even finished the sentence. And I thought, this woman is going to cost me something. I had no idea yet what the bill would look like. We got married on a Saturday in October. She cried during the vows, and I let her cry, and I didn't bother hiding that my own eyes were wet. I remember standing there thinking that the only thing I had ever built that felt more real than my career was whatever I was standing inside at that exact moment. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back to the party. Back to the night. I had been working the room for close to 2 hours. Hugging necks, taking handshakes, laughing in the right places. Nicole had outdone herself with the setup, the flowers, the lighting, the layout, and I meant it when I complimented her. That part was genuine. Whatever I would come to understand about that night, her gift for making a space feel like something real was not in question. I was at the bar getting my 3rd bourbon. Neat. It was my birthday when I noticed her slip out of the conversation she was in. Nothing alarming. Parties brief. People move. I noted it the way you note weather, and went back to talking to Dre. 10 minutes later I looked up, and the bourbon went cold in my hand. Nicole was at the far end of the room, near the staircase, standing beside a man I had met exactly 3 times in 4 years of marriage. DeShawn, her ex-husband. He was broad, tall, the kind of man whose presence announces itself before he speaks. I had looked him up years ago, early in the relationship, the way you look up a person's history when you're falling in love and telling yourself you're not afraid of anything. He was handsome. That was fine. Nicole had a life before me. She'd been honest about all of it. Married young, grew apart, signed the papers, closed the chapter. I had never had a reason to question any of that. Until right now. Because the way she was standing next to him was not the way you stand next to your past. She leaned up close to his ear, said something low. He laughed, quiet, unhurried, and his hand touched the small of her back for exactly 2 seconds. Then she pulled back and her eyes swept the room in one fast arc. Not looking for me, checking if anyone was watching. I was standing in the shadow near the doorway, the light behind me. She didn't find me. Her eyes moved on and settled, satisfied. Then she turned and started up the stairs. DeShawn waited. 3 seconds, then followed. I stood there with 70 people around me. Music playing, someone laughing too loud near the back porch, the warm smell of good food, and I set my glass down on the bar. Flat, quiet, the way you put something down when you are going to need both hands. I crossed the room without hurrying. Face easy, nodded at someone who tried to stop me, reached the bottom of the staircase, and I followed them. I want to tell you something about that walk across the room, about what it feels like to move through a space full of people who believe everything is fine when you are the only person who knows it isn't. You smile at someone. You touch an elbow in greeting. You are physically present in your own birthday party while simultaneously somewhere far away, Inside a calculation your mind started the second you saw her hand on his back. You are performing so well that a part of you almost convinces the rest of you that you are fine. Almost. The distance from the bar to the bottom of that staircase is maybe 20 feet. I covered it in slow, unhurried steps that probably looked like a man going to check on something routine. A catering detail. A noise from upstairs. The easy movement of a man in his own house who has every right to go wherever he wants inside it. I had every right. 70 people were behind me. My mother was back there somewhere, probably still holding her own plate. Dre was back there. People who loved me and had driven hours to be in that room for me were 20 feet behind me eating food I had paid for and toasting a future I was no longer certain existed. I left them all there, and I went up the stairs, because I was not a man who looked away from the thing that needed to be seen. Not ever. Not once in my life. And I was not about to start at my own birthday party. The upstairs hallway is long and narrow. Hardwood floors. I refinished myself the summer after we moved in. For doors. Master bedroom on the left. Guest room at the end. My home office in the middle. And Nicole's reading room on the right. The one she claimed the day we moved in, put her books in, her candles, her weekend chair. I had built her a walnut shelf for that room. 6 feet tall, custom fitted to the wall. Stained and sanded and finished by my own hands on a Saturday she was away. All 4 doors were closed. I stood at the top of the stairs and listened. The party noise floated up from below, like something happening in a different life. Bass from the DJ, voices layered over each other, someone laughing at just the wrong pitch. Up here it was quiet. The kind of quiet that has a weight to it. I moved down the hall, and then I heard them. Before I tell you what I heard, I want to tell you what I felt standing in that hallway. Not anger. Not yet. What I felt was something closer to stillness. The particular stillness of a person who is receiving information that they are going to have to carry for a long time. You know the feeling. When the thing you have been half afraid of walks through the door and makes itself known. And part of you wants to run from it. And the other part of you, the part that has been here before, that knows the cost of running, just stands very still and receives it. I stood still. I received it. Voices. Low and close. Coming through my office door. I didn't knock. I stood outside that door and I listened. The way you listen when part of you already knows, but another part of you is still making the case for doubt. He doesn't know. Nicole's voice. But not the version I knew. Softer. Less careful. The voice she used when she thought she was alone. I need to keep it that way until I figure out what I'm doing. You've been saying that for 8 months. DeShawn. Patient. Unhurried. A man who had been waiting a long time and had decided he would keep waiting a little longer. I'm not pushing you, he said. But I'm not doing this forever, Nicole. A pause. I know, she said. I still love you. I never stopped. 8 months. I stood in my own hallway and did the math. 8 months ago was March. In March, Nicole had told me she was going to Charlotte for a work conference. For days. She had brought me back a small silver keychain from the hotel gift shop. That keychain was on my work bag downstairs. I put my hand flat against the wall. One breath in, one breath out. The way my grandmother taught me before she left this earth. The way she said to breathe when the feeling was too large for your chest to hold still. I did not open the door. Here is the thing people assume about a moment like that. They think you throw the door open. Make the noise. Force the scene. Turn everything dramatic. I am an architect. I do not start demolition before I understand what I am dealing with. You read the structure first. You map what's load-bearing. You understand the full extent of the damage before you touch a single wall. I needed to know the full shape of this before I said one word. So I turned around. I walked back down the hall without a sound, down the stairs, back into my own birthday party, and I picked my glass up from the bar right where I had left it. For the next 2 hours, I was the best version of myself I have ever performed. I laughed. I told stories. I danced with my mother, who is 71 years old and will outlast every one of us. I gave a toast, short, warm, specific, that made Dre tear up and pretend he wasn't. I found Nicole across the room, and I held her hand in front of 68 people and told them she had outdone herself. She squeezed my hand back. She smiled like a woman who had no idea she had already been found. DeShawn left about 2 hours before the party ended. He shook my hand on the way out, looked me directly in the eye, said, "Happy birthday, man. You've got a real good life." I know, I said. I meant every layer of that. That night, I lay beside Nicole and listened to her fall asleep like a person with a clean conscience. I didn't close my eyes until 3 in the morning. Not because I was falling apart. Because I was thinking. She had said 8 months. She had said until I figure out what I'm doing. Not it's over. Not I made a mistake. She was still figuring. Still deciding. Still weighing a future with me against one without me, while sleeping in the bed we shared and eating the dinners I cooked and letting me believe I was building something solid. I got up at 4:30, made coffee, sat in the dark kitchen with my phone face down on the table, and I let myself think without interruption. That is when I do my best work. Always has been. By sunrise, I had 3 decisions made. I knew what I was looking for. I knew what I wasn't going to say yet. And I knew I was going to find everything quietly. You know what's strange? The hardest thing I did that entire night was not standing outside that door. It was not walking back down those stairs. It was not the toast I gave 20 minutes later or the dance with my mother or the handshake I gave DeShawn on his way out. The hardest thing was smiling at Nicole when she found me near the end of the night, wrapped her arms around my neck, and said against my ear, "Did you have a good birthday, baby?" I held her. I said, "Best one yet." I meant neither of those words. And I squeezed her back and let her believe what she needed to believe, because I was not ready. And when you are not ready, when you are still gathering, still mapping the full shape of the damage before you touch anything, the discipline of staying quiet is the hardest and most necessary thing. I had learned that a long time ago, not from a relationship, from buildings. You never start demolition before you understand what you are dealing with. The worst mistakes in construction come from people who move too fast, who see damage and immediately start swinging without reading what is structural and what is cosmetic, without knowing what, if removed, causes the whole thing to come down. I was going to read this thing fully before I moved 1 inch. I want to stop here, because I don't want you thinking I went cold. I didn't. The morning after my birthday party, when Nicole came into the kitchen in her robe and her bonnet, still soft from sleep, smelling like the shea butter she put in her hair every single night, I felt it. That specific gravity she had always had on me. The same pull I felt the first night I walked her to her car, and neither of us could quite say goodnight. Both of us standing in the parking lot past midnight, making reasons to stay 5 more minutes. That's what nobody tells you about being betrayed by someone you love. The love doesn't leave. It stays right there, and the hurt lives beside it. And some mornings you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. I had fallen for Nicole on a Tuesday in November. Coffee shop. The barista had spelled both our names wrong on our cups, and she turned to me and said, "They got yours worse. You and the bad day award." We talked for 45 minutes before either of us ordered, and I drove home that night knowing. The way you sometimes just know that something had shifted permanently. We took it slow. She was upfront about her past. The first marriage, the divorce, the years after where she had rebuilt herself one piece at a time. I respected that. Loved her for it. I thought we were the same kind of person. 2 people who understood that real things take time and care, and you don't rush the foundation. For years of evidence supported that. 4 years of Sunday mornings and stupid arguments about the thermostat, and her falling asleep on my shoulder during movies she had insisted she wanted to watch. 4 years of her sitting in my lap at my desk while I worked late, reading a book, her arm draped over my shoulder, just there, not because she had to be, but because she chose to be. I had believed that choosing. But love, I was learning, doesn't protect you from being wrong about someone. It only makes the cost of being wrong harder to calculate. 2 days after the party, I called my oldest friend Malcolm. Malcolm is a man of almost no words, 0 drama, and the most practical mind I have ever known. He is also a private investigator, something I had never once thought I would need from him. We had been friends since our late 20s. Met at a men's retreat where Malcolm said something so true and funny in the first group session that I immediately knew this was a person who did not waste language. I did not tell him everything on the phone. I told him I needed to sit across from him. He said Thursday. I said okay. Between Monday and Thursday, I watched my wife. Not suspiciously. Carefully. There is a difference. Nicole was warm, present, attentive. She made oxtails on Monday, my favorite, the recipe that takes 3 hours minimum, and poured my glass without me asking, and touched my face gently when she passed behind my chair. I received all of it the way I always had. But now I was reading beneath the warmth. Her phone went face down when she set it on the table now. Every time. She had never done that before. I noted it without reacting. I noted the way she laughed differently on calls taken in the other room. Lighter, younger, less measured. I noted the evening she said, casually, in the middle of an unrelated conversation. DeShawn used to say the same thing, and caught herself and changed the subject so smoothly I nearly missed it. Nearly. I have always had a precise memory. I used it professionally every day, holding a client's full design vision across months of changes without losing a detail. I had never turned it on my own home before. Thursday morning, I sat across from Malcolm in his office above a dry cleaning shop on Auburn Avenue. He took notes on a yellow legal pad with a pen he had probably owned since the 90s. When I finished talking, he asked me 3 questions. Joint accounts or separate? Joint for household. My business finances were mine alone. Kids? No. We had planned to start trying next year. What do you want, Luke? The marriage or the truth? I sat with that one. The truth first, I said. Then I'll figure out the rest. 2 weeks, he said. I drove home from Malcolm's office on a route that took me past the coffee shop where Nicole and I had talked for 45 minutes the first time we met. Past the restaurant where we had our second date, where we sat for 3 hours past when the check came because neither of us wanted to be the one to reach for it, and end the evening. Past the park where we used to walk Sunday mornings before Sundays started filling up with other things. Ordinary geography that had carried ordinary memory for 4 years. Now it carried something else. I want you to understand something about those 2 weeks between Thursday and when Malcolm called. I was not cold during them. I was not in some calm, collected, removed state where the emotion had been neatly set aside to make room for strategy. That is not how any of this works in real life, regardless of how it sounds when someone tells it back. What I was both things at the same time. I was the man who sat across from Malcolm with a clear voice and asked clear questions and drove home purposefully. And I was also the man who stood at the kitchen sink that same evening, washing a single coffee cup, and had to stop and hold the edge of the counter for 30 seconds because the weight of it moved through me all at once and left as fast as it came. Both of those men were me. Both of those things were true. What I had decided, in the kitchen at 4:30 the morning after the party, was that the grief was going to have its moments, and I was going to let them happen, and then I was going to keep moving. Because the grief without direction was just pain, and I had work to do. I also want to tell you about the drive home from Malcolm's office that Thursday, because it is the kind of thing I would have skipped over before all of this, as not particularly noteworthy. A man driving home. Fine. But I passed the coffee shop where we met on that Tuesday in November. I passed the restaurant from our second date. I passed the park. I passed all of it, and what I noticed was that the geography had not changed. The coffee shop was still there. The park was still there. The streets were the same streets they had always been. Only the meaning had changed. And what I understood, driving through all of that familiar geography with a yellow legal pad being filled on Malcolm's desk on Auburn Avenue, is that love does not unmake itself when you find out the truth. It stays exactly where you left it. In the coffee shop, in the park, in 4 years of Sunday mornings, and argued thermostats and oxtails and walnut shelves. All of that was real. It had happened. The truth I was sitting with did not reach back and erase it. It just meant I was going to have to grieve 2 things at the same time. The betrayal, and the good thing the betrayal had been hiding inside of. Malcolm called me on a Friday. 8 days later. Not 2 weeks, 8 days. That told me something before he said one word. I stepped out of a client meeting, walked to the far end of the parking garage, and answered. He didn't start slow. Malcolm never does. She's been seeing him since March. I've got hotel records, 2 stays in Charlotte, 1 in Savannah, 1 here in Atlanta, 15 minutes from your house. I pressed my back against the concrete pillar. The Savannah trip, he said. That was the weekend she told you she was at her cousin's baby shower. I remembered that weekend. I had built Nicole's reading room shelf while she was gone. Spent the whole Saturday on it. Sanded every edge smooth so she wouldn't catch a splinter. Sent her a picture when I was done. She had texted back a line of heart emojis and said she couldn't wait to fill it with her books. There's more. Malcolm's voice shifted just slightly. I had known him long enough to know what that shift meant. 6 weeks ago, DeShawn put a down payment on a townhouse. Buckhead. 2 bedrooms. A pause. The secondary name on the mortgage application is Nicole DeWitt Carter. DeWitt Carter. My name. The one she had added to hers on our wedding day. She had used my name to help another man buy a home. I stood in that parking garage and breathed. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Slow and deliberate. The way my grandmother taught me when I was 9 years old, and the world felt too large and too wrong for my chest to hold it. 30 years since I'd needed that lesson. But the body remembers. 1 breath. 2. Send me everything, I said. Already sent, he said. I went back into that client meeting. Sat down. Finished the presentation. Shook 3 hands. Collected 2 business cards. Made 2 promises about follow-up calls. Not 1 word of it showed on my face. Then I drove directly to my attorney. Linda Barnes. Family law. 22 years of practice. She has a quality of stillness that very good lawyers develop over time. The kind that makes you feel like the most important person in the room without her ever adjusting her voice. She took my phone, scrolled through Malcolm's file slowly, set it back on the desk between us. You're going to be fine, she said. And with Linda, that was not comfort. That was assessment. But we moved quickly and quietly. The property co-signing is the most urgent piece. She gave me a list. Precise, ordered, no wasted steps. I wrote her a check in the parking lot. Sat in the car a long time before I started the engine. I thought about the shelf. The one I had spent all of Saturday building while Nicole was in Savannah. Walnut. 6 feet tall. Finished with my own hands as a surprise. She had filled it with her books one by one the evening she got home, telling me where each one came from, what it meant to her. I had sat on the edge of her reading chair and watched her and thought, this is what I built the whole life for. Moments exactly like this. That shelf was still in her reading room. I started the car and drove home to cook dinner. That sentence is worth sitting with for a second. I had just left my attorney's office with documentation proving that my wife had used my name on another man's mortgage, had been conducting a sustained relationship for 8 months, and had helped herself to $11,000 in quiet preparation for a future that did not include me. And I drove home. And I cooked dinner. Salmon. Roasted asparagus. The good rice. A meal I had made a dozen times in that kitchen without a single thought. A meal that said, to anyone watching, to Nicole when she came home and smelled it from the front door, that nothing was wrong. That tonight was just another evening. That the man in the kitchen was the same man he had always been. I needed her to believe that for a little while longer. Not because I was trying to trap her. Not out of cruelty. Because I had not yet assembled everything I needed. And I had learned, from 12 years of building things that had to hold weight, that had to be trusted by the people inside them, that you do not close the wall before the wiring is done. You do not lay the floor before the substructure is right. You do not put a roof on something that does not yet have a sound foundation. I was still laying the foundation. There is a thing architects say, a saying I heard my first week in graduate school from a professor with the particular weariness of someone who has watched too many talented people fail for the same reason. He said, a building is only as good as what happens before you break ground. He meant the drawings, the calculations, the material research, the site analysis, all the work that looks like nothing from the outside, that produces no visible output, that earns you nothing in the short term. But that work is the work. And when you rush it, when you are impatient for the visible part, the part people can see, the part that looks like progress, you build something that will eventually fail in ways you cannot predict, in a timeline you cannot control, at a cost that is always higher than if you had simply done the preparation correctly in the first place. I was doing the preparation. I had documentation. I had an attorney. I had a plan in 3 steps, each one dependent on the one before it. All I needed was to hold my position a little longer and do it well enough that nothing was disturbed prematurely. I was still laying the foundation. Nicole came home at 6:45. She smelled the food from the hallway and said, "Oh, you cooked." In the warm, pleased way she said it when she'd had a long day and someone had taken that particular decision off her hands. I said, "Sit down. It's almost ready." She sat. I brought her a plate. And we ate dinner together and talked about our days. And she told me something funny that had happened at work, and I laughed at the right moment. And outside the kitchen window, the Atlanta evening did what Atlanta evenings do. And I kept laying the foundation. Here is the part that still sits strange when I think back on it. Nicole was kind to me. Through all of it. Not guilty distant. Not picking arguments to create space. Not manufacturing the slow, cool atmosphere of someone preparing to leave. She cooked. She laughed at my jokes. The corny ones, which she had always been too smart to truly find funny, but laughed at anyway, because she knew I needed the permission. She came to my firm's spring gala in a deep green dress that made 3 of my colleagues forget how to finish their sentences, and she held my arm the entire night and introduced herself as Mrs. Carter like the name was hers by right. On the drive home, She put her hand over mine on the gear shift. City lights moving past the windows. Radio low. She looked at the road and said, "I love you, Luke. I hope you know that." I kept my eyes forward. "I know," I said. And the most complicated, most painful truth of that whole period is that I believed her. Not fully. Not without the grief underneath it. But I believe Nicole did love me. I think she loved me and DeShawn at the same time, in different ways, and instead of making the choice that honesty required, instead of doing the hard, uncomfortable, decent thing, she had let it grow roots she couldn't bring herself to pull up. That is not an excuse. I want to be plain about that. Loving two people and lying to both of them is not complicated. It is a decision. A daily decision, remade every morning, that someone else pays for while you stay comfortable. But I had decided early, sitting in the dark kitchen at 4:30 the morning after my party, that I was only going to deal in truth from here forward. And the truth included understanding what I was actually dealing with, not just what made me angry. One evening I came home from work slightly early. Traffic had been light. I came in through the side door, set my bag on the kitchen counter, and heard her voice through the back screen. She was on the porch. On the phone. She hadn't heard me come in. I stood in the kitchen and listened. "I'm trying, DeShawn. You have to give me time." Her voice was quiet. The soft version. A pause. "Because I don't want to hurt him." Her voice dropped lower. "He doesn't deserve that. Luke is a good man." I stood there with the lights off around me. She told another man I was a good man. Standing on my back porch. In my house. While I was holding my work bag in the kitchen 20 feet away. "I know you love me," she said. "But some things can't just be undone." I made promises. Not I love him. Not I chose him. She said she made promises. Like I was a contract she was trying to honor. Like our marriage was an obligation she was working around rather than a life she had decided to live. My throat tightened once. Then I set my bag down quietly, walked to the bedroom, changed out of my work clothes, walked back to the kitchen, and started pulling food out of the refrigerator. I made enough noise that she would hear me. Gave her every chance to end the call naturally before she came inside. When she came through the screen door 20 minutes later, her phone was in her pocket and her voice had shifted back to the careful version. "You're home early," she said. "Light traffic," I said. I handed her a glass of sweet tea and kissed her forehead. She leaned back against the counter and held the glass with both hands and watched me cook, and there was something in her face right then, sad and grateful and guilty all braided together. That told me she was close to saying something real. She didn't say it. I didn't push. My attorney had said, maintain normal behavior. Malcolm had said, let the documents build. And my grandmother, who had never met either of those people, had told me when I was a boy something I had carried like a compass ever since. A quiet man with the truth is the most dangerous thing in any room. I was the quietest I had ever been in my life. I want you to notice something. Notice that every time this story could have gone loud, I went quiet. Every time there was a moment designed to make me react. The hand on her back, the voices through the door, the soft version of her voice on the porch. I went quiet. That is not because I didn't feel anything. I felt everything. Every single thing. But I had decided in that dark kitchen at 4:30 in the morning that this situation was going to be handled on my terms. Not on the terms of the hurt. Not on the terms of the betrayal. On the terms of a man who knew what he was doing and was doing it precisely. And here's the thing about that kind of quiet. From the outside, it looks like peace. It looks like a man who is unbothered, steady, in possession of himself. People at the firm told me I seemed focused. Dre called one evening and said I sounded better than I had in weeks. Even Nicole, who was closer to me than anyone, seemed reassured by my steadiness. Seemed to take it as evidence that she had bought herself more time. She hadn't. The quiet was not peace. The quiet was direction. It was me, every single day, choosing the long game over the fast one. Every morning I woke up and made the coffee and handed Nicole her cup and did not say the thing I was holding. That was a choice. Every evening I sat across from her at dinner and listened to her talk about her day and did not say the thing I was holding. That was a choice. Every single day I chose to wait, and every single day it cost me something, and every single day I paid it because I knew what was on the other side. My grandmother used to say, the person who can wait is always more powerful than the person who can't. She said it about a lot of things. About patience in general. About what happens when you want something real versus something fast. About the difference between a man who reacts and a man who responds. I had spent my whole life trying to be the second kind. This was the test of it. I was the quietest I had ever been, and I was almost ready. Linda Barnes called on a Tuesday. "Come in this afternoon," she said. Something came up in the financial review. I cleared my schedule. Her office was clean and ordered, afternoon light coming through the blinds in straight lines across her desk. The folder in front of her was thicker than the one from my first visit. She opened it with the care of someone who respects the weight of what's inside. She walked me through it without rushing. First, 3 months ago, Nicole had opened a savings account in her name only. Small transfers every month. Nothing individually flagged. But over 90 days, $11,000 had moved quietly out of our shared life into a place I had no visibility into. I sat very still. I thought about Monday's oxtails, about the green dress at the gala, about her hand over mine on the gear shift. $11,000. "She's building a runway," Linda said. "No drama, just facts. People do this when they're preparing for a transition. She may not have made a final decision, but her financial behavior is ahead of her emotional one." Second, Malcolm's documentation showed that 3 weeks prior, DeShawn had added Nicole to an insurance policy as a named dependent. She was not fully gone, but she was halfway out a door she had never let me see. Linda looked at me across her desk. "What do you want, Luke?" The answer shapes every move we make. I had more time with that question now. Weeks of quiet dinners, held hands, the green dress, her voice through the screen, doors saying I made promises. "I want out," I said. "Clean. With everything that is mine protected." Linda nodded once. "3 steps," she said. "I want you to understand what it means to sit across from someone like Linda Barnes when your life has produced the kind of documents that were sitting in that folder. It is not dramatic. That is the thing. You imagine it would be dramatic, the moment when all the proof is on the table. But what it actually is quiet. Profoundly quiet. The quiet of someone finally seeing the complete picture after weeks of assembling pieces in the dark. The documents were not surprising. Not by then. I had suspected most of what was in them from the night of the party. Malcolm had confirmed the shape of it. Linda was now showing me the precise legal and financial dimensions. But there is a difference between knowing something and seeing it in a folder on a lawyer's desk. Seeing it made it permanent in a different way. Made it the kind of thing that had happened to my actual life, not just to the version of my life I had been quietly processing since a birthday party. I sat with that difference for a moment. Then I said, "What do we do first?" And Linda told me, 3 steps. File financial separation paperwork first. Freeze any further transfers. Formally dispute the property co-signing as unauthorized use of marital assets. Then, and only then, have the conversation. I left her office in the fading afternoon and sat in my car and called my mother. She picked up on the second ring. She always does. "Baby," she said. Just that one word. My mother has always been able to put more in a single word than most people manage in a full sentence. I told her enough. Not everything, but enough. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't say she had sensed something was wrong, though I believe she had. In the quiet way mothers sense things they don't speak out loud until they're needed. What she said was, "Come eat Saturday. Don't say a word to nobody until you sit across from me." Then she said, "And Luke, you built everything in that house. Don't let nobody walk out with your blueprints." She hung up before I could respond. My mother does that. Says the thing that needs saying and doesn't dilute it with anything after. I held the phone in my hand and sat with that for a moment. She had raised me alone, mostly, after my father died when I was 11. She had done it without complaint and without excess, and with the absolute certainty of a woman who knows that resources, time, energy, love, patience, are not unlimited and have to be directed with intention. She had never had the luxury of being careless with any of it, and she had never once let me be careless with myself. Not when it mattered. She was not going to start now. I drove home through the Atlanta evening with something in my chest I hadn't felt in weeks. Not peace. Something better than peace. Direction. I want to tell you what that feels like, when you have been in the fog of not knowing, and then suddenly the shape of the thing becomes clear. It does not feel triumphant. It does not feel satisfying. Not yet. Not the way people imagine it from the outside. It feels like the moment in a dark room when someone finally finds the light switch. Not joy. Just the simple, enormous relief of being able to see what you were dealing with. I could see clearly now. I knew the full shape of what had been done in my house, in my marriage, in my name. I had the documents to support what I knew. I had an attorney who knew what to do with them. I had a plan that was 3 steps long, and each step was specific and achievable and quiet. There is something I have always believed about difficult situations, something I learned in architecture school and proved again and again in the field over 12 years. The solution is almost never more complicated than the problem. People overcomplicate their response to damage because the damage made them feel out of control, and they want the response to feel proportional to the pain. But a precise, targeted response almost always outperforms a dramatic one. I was going to be precise. I was going to be targeted. And I was not going to be dramatic. Not because I didn't have the right to be. Because drama hands the situation to the other person. Drama makes them the center. And I was done letting other people be the center of my life without my permission. Saturday was 4 days away. I drove home, made dinner, sat across from Nicole, and had the kind of easy, ordinary conversation that had made up our evenings for 4 years. She talked about a difficult client. I listened. I asked a question. She lit up a little. I watched her and felt the love and the hurt and the clarity all in the same breath. For more days. Saturday. Not a special Saturday. Just the one where the morning light comes through the kitchen window at the angle that used to make me feel like the day was full of possibility before it had a chance to become anything yet. Nicole was in the shower. I had already been up 2 hours. Coffee made. Phone checked. Linda's paperwork was filed. Malcolm's full documentation sat in a sealed envelope at the firm. 3 copies, 3 separate locations. The kind of safekeeping you learn from 12 years of making sure the important things don't get lost. My mother knew. Dre knew. The only 2 people on this earth I trusted with the real version of anything. I was ready. But I had made one decision early, and I was not changing it now. I was not going to arrange the documents on the table like a courtroom. I was not going to turn this into a performance. I had loved this woman. I had built 4 years of real life with her. We both deserved the truth said plainly, between 2 adults, with no audience and no drama. I poured her coffee, set it on her side of the counter, 2 sugars, a pour of oat milk, stirred with the small spoon, not the large one. She had told me that preference on our 3rd date. I had never once gotten it wrong in 4 years. She came into the kitchen from the shower in her robe, bonnet still on, and she stopped when she saw the cup waiting. You made mine, she said. I always make yours, I said. She sat and wrapped both hands around the mug, and we were quiet together in the Saturday morning the way we had been quiet together 100 times. The light moved across the tile. A bird made its case somewhere in the oak tree. Then I said, Nicole, I need to talk to you about something real. She looked up, and I watched 8 months of careful management pass through her eyes in under a second. Not shock, not surprise, recognition. The expression of someone who has known a moment was coming and is almost relieved it's finally here. Okay, she said, quietly. I heard you and DeShawn in my office the night of my birthday party, I said. I stood outside that door for 2 minutes before I turned around and walked back to my own party. You said you had been hiding it for 8 months. I have known everything since that night. Her hands tightened around the mug. I kept going. Not to wound her. To be complete. I know about Charlotte, I said. Both trips. I know about Savannah. The weekend you told me you were at a baby shower. I know about the savings account you started in January. I know about the townhouse in Buckhead with your name on the mortgage application. I know all of it, Nicole. Every piece. She set the mug down. Her hands were shaking. Luke, I'm not asking for an explanation, I said. I'm telling you what I know so we can have this conversation honestly. Not with you managing what you think I know. With everything on the table. The silence that followed was the longest we had ever sat in together. Outside, the bird finished its argument. Inside, just the 2 of us and the morning light and 4 years of something real that had become something else. When Nicole spoke, her voice was stripped of all the careful management. What was left underneath was just a person, tired of the weight of a secret. I'm so sorry. She pressed both palms flat on the counter. I am genuinely, deeply sorry. You did not deserve any of this. You have been nothing but good to me, and her voice broke once. She held it. I don't have a reason that makes it okay. There is no version of what I did that is okay. I believe that, I said. It started as just talking, she said. And I kept telling myself I was going to stop it. And I kept not stopping it. And every day I didn't tell you was another day I was lying to you in this house. She looked at the counter. I am so sorry, Luke. I looked at her for a long, quiet moment. My wife. The burnt orange dress. The Saturday mornings. The oxtails. The walnut shelf. I believe you're sorry, I said. But sorry doesn't change what happened. And I deserve someone who is fully choosing me, not someone who is still deciding. She closed her eyes, nodded slowly, and in that nod was the full, quiet acknowledgement of everything she had not been able to say in 8 months. She already knew this was over. She had probably known for a while. The difference was that now we were both saying it at the same time. Do you want to know what a man sounds like when he has decided not to negotiate? He sounds calm. He sounds clear. He does not yell. He does not list grievances in the tone of someone who has been rehearsing them. He does not cry, though the crying would have been justified and would not have made him smaller. He simply says the true things in the order they need to be said, and when he is finished, there is nothing left to argue with. Because you cannot argue with the truth when it is stated without heat. That is what I had been preparing for, all those early mornings and quiet evenings and sealed envelopes. Not for the confrontation, for the clarity. Nicole cried. Not dramatically, just the slow, quiet crying of someone who knows they have caused real damage to someone who did not deserve it and can no longer pretend otherwise. She kept both hands flat on the counter, like she was steadying herself, and the tears came, and she let them, and she didn't reach for performance. I handed her a dish towel. She took it and pressed it to her face for a moment. We sat in the kitchen for another 20 minutes. Not arguing, not relitigating. Just two people who had built something real together sitting in the rubble of it and being honest with each other for the first time in 8 months. When she left the kitchen to go pack a bag to stay at her sister's that night, she stopped in the doorway. I'm sorry I made you into someone who had to be this careful, she said. I looked at her. I was already careful, I said. That part is mine. She nodded. And then she was gone down the hallway, and I sat alone at the kitchen counter and breathed, and the morning light had shifted while we were talking, and the Saturday had become something other than what it started as. Nicole moved out on a Wednesday. She didn't take much. Her clothes, her books from the walnut shelf, her grandmother's quilt, the coffee machine she had picked out herself and had strong feelings about. She left the furniture, the art we'd chosen together, the kitchen things. She left the wedding photo on the hallway wall. She stood in the doorway of the master bedroom one last time, looking at it the way you look at something you are memorizing rather than something you are leaving. Then she turned to me. The shelf, she said. Her voice was small. Can I take it? It's yours, I said. I built it for you. She nodded and didn't say anything else, and neither did I, because neither of us could have extended that moment any further and still held ourselves together. After the moving truck left, I stood in the middle of the living room in the quiet of a Wednesday afternoon and just breathed. The house felt different. Not emptier. More honest. I called Malcolm. It's done, I said. You okay? He said. I thought about that question for a second. Really considered it. I will be, I said. And I meant it in the specific way you mean something when you have looked clearly at the full shape of your situation and understood that the worst of it is now behind you. Not healed. Not finished grieving. But past the part where the ground is still moving under you. On solid footing. I was on solid footing. That mattered. I want to tell you about the weeks that followed. Because this is the part people skip. They rush to the victory, the resolution, the proof it was worth it. But the weeks after are the weeks I think about most when I am being honest with myself. I relearned how to be alone in a space I had designed for two. I cooked dinner for one and ate it standing at the counter the first few nights because the table felt like it was asking me something I wasn't ready to answer. I slept on my side of the bed for 2 nights before I understood there was no longer a reason. Then I slept in the middle. That was both the loneliest and the most freeing thing I had done in years. I worked. The community center project was moving. But let me be honest about what the working looked like on the hard days. Because there were hard days. There was a Thursday, about 10 days after Nicole moved out, when I came home to an empty house after a long meeting that had gone sideways, and I stood in the kitchen and the specific quality of the silence, not the good quiet, the other kind, the hollow kind, was more than I had room for in that moment. I sat down on the kitchen floor, not collapsed, not broken, just sat down on the tile I had laid myself 3 summers ago, with my back against the cabinet, and I let the grief be what it was for about 15 minutes. Then I got up, washed my face, made something to eat, sat at the table like a person who was going to be all right. That is what the hard days actually look like. Not cinematic, not permanent, just real and manageable and something you move through and past. The floor, and then upright. The grief, and then forward. I worked. The community center project was moving. A recreation facility in the West End. Affordable housing initiative. The kind of work that reminds you why you became an architect instead of just chasing contracts and fees. I poured myself into the drawings, and it helped the way real work always helps. It fills the space where grief would otherwise just echo. Dre called every few days. Not to talk about Nicole. Just to talk. About nothing that required anything from me. The specific kindness of a friend who knows when to say something and when to just be on the line. My mother came over on the second Friday with 2 grocery bags and no announcement. Cooked enough food for a week, labeled everything in the refrigerator, then sat with me at the kitchen counter and talked about everything except Nicole for an hour, which was exactly right. At the end of the hour, she set her teacup down. She called me, she said. I looked at her. Nicole. She called to tell me she was sorry. Didn't ask me to say anything to you. Didn't ask for anything. Just needed someone in your family to hear her say it directly. I sat with that. What did you tell her? I told her I appreciated the call. My mother's voice was even and fair, and that my son would be more than all right. She patted my hand once. Firm. The way she has since I was a little boy who didn't know what to do with whatever the world had just handed him. Then we watched the evening come in through the kitchen window, and neither of us needed another word. I stayed until 9. My mother found the remote, turned the TV volume to exactly the right level, loud enough to fill the room, low enough to not demand attention, and we watched her game show, and I got teased for knowing an answer I should not have known, and I ate 2 helpings of whatever was in those labeled containers she had brought, and it was, without exaggeration, the best I had felt since my birthday party. That is the underrated thing about family, not the big moments. The capacity to make a Wednesday evening feel like enough. When I got home, I sat in the driveway for a few minutes before going inside. The house was lit the way it always was when I left, lights on. Kitchen, the small lamp in the living room on its timer. From the outside, it looked like any house on any block. Nobody driving past would know that everything inside it had recently shifted. But inside, I knew exactly what it was. Mine. All of it. Fully mine in a way it hadn't been for the last 8 months, when someone was living in it who was quietly making other plans. I went straight to the reading room. The walnut shelves were gone. The room was bare, 4 walls, good bones, afternoon light during the day. I had already moved the first things in. My old drawing table, the industrial one from my first apartment, was halfway into position near the window. I spent an hour getting it exactly right, testing the angle, checking how the light hit the work surface, figuring out where the lamp needed to go. Pure, practical problem solving. The kind that quiets the mind by giving it something real to do. By the time I was done, the room had changed. It had a purpose. It had a person in it who belonged to it. I stood in it for a moment and just stood. Then I went to bed, and for the first time in a long time, I slept straight through until morning. 3 months later, Linda Barnes called with the final paperwork. Everything settled cleanly. The house was mine, had been in my name before the marriage, and remained mine throughout. A fact Linda had noted with quiet appreciation from our first meeting. Joint accounts were properly divided. The Buckhead property co-signing dispute was formally resolved. DeShawn's name was the only one on that mortgage. The unauthorized use of my marital identity was addressed without a public fight. I signed the final document on a Tuesday morning, ordinary light through the office blinds. Linda sliding the pen across the desk with the same calm she had brought to every interaction we'd had. I signed it and felt something lift that I had not known I was still carrying. I went to therapy during those 3 months. That is not the dramatic part of this story, but it is the truest thing I did. My therapist is Dr. Pamela Harris, sharp, unhurried, with reading glasses on a chain and no patience for insight that was really just self-pity in good clothing. She helped me see something I had been circling for years without naming. I had spent 12 years building a life, and somewhere in all that building I had started to believe that if I provided enough, showed up with enough consistency, built enough walnut shelves and birthday parties and cups of coffee made exactly right, it would be sufficient. That it would be proof. That it would make someone stay. But people don't stay because of what you've built. They stay because of who they are. Nicole had her own unfinished rooms when she came to me. Doors she'd left open walking out of her first marriage that she had never gone back to close properly. I could not have built my way out of that. No amount of love or presence from me was going to close those doors for her. That was work only she could do. That was not a comfortable understanding, but it was a true one. And the truth is always more useful than the comfortable story, even when the comfortable story is kinder. Now, the consequences. Malcolm had documented thoroughly. That is what Malcolm does. And in his documentation, certain patterns had emerged about DeShawn's use of work resources during business hours for personal communications. Malcolm documented what he observed. What DeShawn's employer did with that information, once it appeared in the legal record, was between them. I will tell you that an internal review took place. I will tell you I did not call anyone to make that happen. As for Nicole's professional situation, she had built a client base in property consulting, and several of her key referrals had come through relationships she'd built inside my network. People who knew me. People who trusted me because I had once, in the warm certainty of a marriage I believed in, told them she was someone worth trusting. I made no calls. I sent no emails. I said nothing to those clients. But people pay attention. Truth becomes visible on its own timetable. And when the shape of what had happened became clear through the natural movement of time, some of those referrals quietly found other directions. There is a line between consequence and revenge. I know where that line sits. I stayed on my side of it. That matters to me more than any outcome does. What I did instead was build. The West End Community Center broke ground in the spring. I was on site the morning they poured the foundation, in my good boots that my mother had already warned me about, standing in Georgia mud watching concrete settle into the form I had designed when all of this was still lines on paper and belief. That was my work going into the ground. Dre came to the groundbreaking. Malcolm came, in an actual tie, which I had never once seen in 20 years of friendship. My mother came in her good shoes, stood firm on the sidewalk, and cheered loud enough that the whole crew looked up. I took a picture of the four of us, posted it with one line, building something that'll last. The response was more than I expected. Old clients, old professors, people I hadn't heard from in years leaving messages I read slowly and kept. That night, I went home and made dinner for one and ate it at the kitchen table, which I had started using again sometime around week 4, once I stopped treating the space like it was asking me to justify myself. And the quiet was the good kind. The kind that doesn't need anything from you. The reading room was empty. The walnut shelf was gone with Nicole. Just 4 walls and afternoon light and bare floor. I had been thinking about what to put in it. And now I knew. The drafting table was in. The drawings were on the walls. The morning light fell across the work surface at the exact angle I had positioned the table to catch. It was mine, fully, in a way no room in this house had ever been fully mine. I had designed every space here for us, for both of us, for the 2-person life I thought I was building. This one I designed for me. Just me. And it turned out that was something I had needed without knowing I was allowed to need it. Malcolm stopped by one afternoon during those 3 months, which is his way. He doesn't call ahead very far. He texted when he was around the corner, and I had coffee ready by the time he parked. We talked for an hour about nothing in particular. A boxing match. A block in East Atlanta he was considering as an investment. A mutual friend who had recently done something mildly foolish that neither of us felt the need to analyze very hard. We did not talk about Nicole. We did not talk about what Malcolm had found or what it had taken to get here. Just 2 men who had been friends long enough to know that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to talk about absolutely nothing for an hour and let them be a person rather than a situation. Before he left, he stopped in the doorway of the drafting room and looked at the drawings on the walls. He was quiet for a moment in the way Malcolm is quiet. Full, deliberate, not an absence of thought. "This is the room you needed," he said. "Yeah," I said. He picked up his keys and was gone. That was the whole exchange. But I thought about what he said for the rest of the day, and what I kept coming back to was how true it was and how long it had taken me to make the space for it. You build things for the life you believe you're living. Then the life changes, and you have a choice about whether to keep living in what you built for someone else's version of things, or to finally build something for yours. I had started building for mine. 8 months. That number had started this whole story, said through a closed door in Nicole's soft voice. The length of a deception I had not known about. Now here I was, 8 months on the other side of it. And the number had become something different. It had become how long it takes to grieve something real and come out the other side still yourself. Still standing. Still building. The reading room was my drafting room now. I had moved my old drawing table in there. The big tilted one I had kept in storage because Nicole said it was too industrial for the aesthetic. I put it directly in front of the window that gets the morning light. Pinned my current project drawings to the walls. Positioned a lamp at the right angle for late evenings. It was, without question, the most alive and purposeful room in the house. The room that finally felt like it had always been waiting to become exactly this. Let me tell you honestly what happened with Nicole and DeShawn. Because you have been waiting for it, and you deserve the real version. They moved into the Buckhead townhouse. I heard this through Dre, not through gossip, just through the ordinary movement of information through a circle of people whose lives intersect over enough years. They were together officially. She was going by DeWitt again, her name before either marriage. I felt nothing particular when I heard that. I want to be precise about what I mean. I am not performing calm. I processed the grief fully, without shortcuts, and what remained on the other side was genuinely clean. I did not need Nicole to be suffering to feel like the story ended right. I did not need DeShawn's life to fall apart to feel like mine was intact. What I had wanted was out, clean, with everything that was mine protected. That was exactly what I had. The professional consequences were what they were. The legal record was what it was. Malcolm documented what he observed. Employers and clients made their own decisions based on information that was simply true. That is how accountability works when you handle it properly. You don't have to burn anything down. You just have to let the truth be visible. Fire tends to find its own way to what needs burning without you having to carry the match. What I did was keep building. The West End Community Center opened on a Thursday in November. Atlanta fall morning, sky that particular clear blue that only comes after the heat finally breaks. Air that smelled like the season deciding to commit. I was there early. Always am. I walked every room before the ribbon cutting the way I always walk a building when it is newly complete. My hand along the walls. Eyes in the corners checking light angles. Making sure the space felt like the thing I had intended when it was still just drawings and belief. It felt like something that would last. My mother came. Dre came. Malcolm came in the same tie as the groundbreaking, which I made a point of telling him I noticed. During the ribbon cutting, a little girl from the neighborhood council, Aaliyah, maybe 7 years old, hair in 2 perfect puffs, raised her hand and asked if she could pull the ribbon. Her mother looked at me. I handed Aaliyah the ribbon without a word and watched her pull it with both hands and then throw both arms into the air like she had just won something enormous. She had. A few minutes later, she ran through the main hall at full speed and her voice echoed up into the high ceilings in that perfect, resonant way. The way that only happens when a space is built correctly, when the proportions and materials and height are all in right relationship with each other. Everyone in the room went quiet for just a second. That echo, that sound, in that space, made by those walls, designed by my hands from lines on paper into something a child could run through and fill with her voice. I looked across the room at my mother. She raised her chin slightly. That small, certain nod she has been giving me since I was a little boy. I told you. I smiled at her and meant it all the way down. 3 weeks after the center opened, I was getting ready for a client dinner, standing in front of the bathroom mirror in my good navy suit, and I stopped in the middle of tightening my tie and just looked at myself. Not a check, a real look. I looked like a man who had been through something and come out the other side with his foundation still intact. Not unchanged. I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. Changed, actually, in ways that had mostly been improvements. Less certain of things that didn't deserve certainty. More honest about what I actually needed versus what I had been willing to settle for in the name of what looked like a life. That was the real cost of what Nicole had done. Not the legal piece, not the financial piece, not even the grief of it. The cost was the 2 years before the party where I had been so busy performing the life that I had not noticed the things that were quietly wrong. Too busy building the surface to check what was happening underneath. I would not do that again. My phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it. A text from a number I had saved 3 months ago. From a conversation I had thought about on exactly 9 separate occasions and been deliberately honest with myself about each time. Hey Luke, I saw the news segment about the center opening. It looks beautiful. You must be proud. Celeste. I set the phone down. Looked at myself in the mirror one more second. Celeste Washington. We had met the morning of the groundbreaking. Community liaison for the neighborhood association, there in her professional capacity. She had walked across the mud in boots that meant she had done this kind of thing before, extended her hand with the firmness of someone who had never needed to perform confidence, and said, "I've been following this project for 2 years. You're going to change this block." I had said, "That's the idea." She had smiled. Easy, direct, no performance behind it. Good. This neighborhood has been waiting on somebody who actually builds what he promises. We had talked for 45 minutes before either of us noticed the ceremony had started. She was sharp and warm and said exactly what she thought. And when she laughed, it was the kind of laugh that has nothing to hide. Just real. Just the laugh. I had noted it. I had been precisely honest with myself about noting it. And I had not done anything about it for 3 months because I was a man closing one chapter and I had no business opening another before that one was done. But the paperwork was signed. The chapter was closed. The drafting table was in the reading room where it belonged. The community center was open. I picked up the phone. Typed. More than I can say. You should come see it in person. 40 seconds. I'd love that. When's a good time? I typed. Saturday morning. The light comes in from the east. Worth seeing it at the right hour. She sent back one word. Perfect. I put my phone in my jacket pocket. Straightened my collar. Picked up my keys. The house was quiet around me. Not the hollow quiet of something missing. Not the heavy quiet of something wrong. Just the good quiet of a space that belongs to the person standing in it. The quiet that doesn't ask you to justify yourself or perform anything or manage how you appear. The quiet of a home that is simply, completely yours. I walked down the hallway past the drafting room. Morning light window, project drawings pinned to the walls. The work of the next thing already in progress. Down the stairs I had refinished with my own hands. Through the kitchen where I had made coffee at 4:30 the morning after my birthday party and decided what kind of man I was going to be about all of this. I opened the front door. November night. Softer than it had any right to be. Stars out over the neighborhood. Somewhere down the block. Music drifting through an open window. Something slow and true. The kind of song that knows what it's doing. I stood on my porch for one moment. Not hesitating. Not looking back. Just standing still inside a good moment. The way I had learned, in these 8 months, to do. To let the good thing be fully itself before you move on from it. To not rush past the evidence that you are going to be all right. Then I stepped off the porch, walked to my car, and drove toward whatever came next. Thank you for watching until the very end. If any part of this story hits something real in you, something you've carried, something you've survived, something you needed to hear, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I have 2 more stories dropping this week that you do not want to come to late. Drop a comment right now and tell me, what moment in this story stopped you cold? I read every single one. Every one.